Hey, everybody. Welcome to the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast. Hey, what we do on this podcast is talk about what B2B sales and marketing leaders, operators, and experts are doing today to really break through and grow their businesses at exponential levels. Let's get it in the interview. At the end, I'll give you an update on my courses, and you can check out my website at b2brevenue.com, and it's Brian G. Burns on LinkedIn. Hey, Steve, welcome to the show. As a way of getting started, tell us about yourself.
Brian, thanks for having me. What a pleasure to be on here. I have been in the insurance industry for almost my entire career, working with businesses, helping them manage insurance programs. For the last 20 years, I've looked at technology and its interplay with the industry, the insurance industry, helping them understand how to use different emerging technologies for both operational efficiency, but also for helping their clients make sure they have the right insurance coverages.
Yeah. And you wrote a book, didn't you?
I did, and actually that's part of where the book came out of. Surprisingly enough, a few years ago, I was really looking at the idea of the intersection of risk-taking and technology development, and started exploring this crazy idea that perhaps the biggest risk a business takes is actually not taking enough risk. And so that is led me to researching a lot of different companies, some no longer in business, some doing quite well.
Yeah.
What's the difference? And that's where I came across Amazon, discovered Jeff Bezos' shareholder letters, and did a deep dive into those letters because I was fascinated actually with how much advice and information he provided.
Yeah, because I think I'd never really sold much to insurance companies, but when I did, I found them kind of laggards.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
And I mean, it makes sense when you think about it. They see all the worst that can happen every day because right, accidents or death or slip and falls or all of those kinds of things. And so they tend to be very risk averse. And that's where this crazy idea first generated about risk taking in today's world. Frankly, because technology continues to develop so rapidly, businesses of all kinds, insurance or any others, just don't have the time they used to examine how does this impact us? What do we have to do? How do we have to respond?
And that's it. And I think they're getting disrupted right now, aren't they?
Yeah, very much so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of new players coming in, a lot of ideas about how to change the customer experience. And frankly, that's where, Amazon has done an amazing job in developing that.
Because several of my friends that I had worked with went there on the technology side.
Yeah.
And when they came out with AWS, Amazon Web Services, which a lot of people either know about or don't, but I always thought that was a weird move. But then now it seems obvious. But
now it seems obvious. And actually Bezos calls AWS in a couple of interviews a business miracle for Amazon. Because what he said was, on other innovations and things they invented, like let's just say the Kindle, they released the Kindle in 2007. 2 years later, the Nook came out. 2 years after they started selling books online, Barnes & Noble started selling books online. And he says we would have a 2-year lead. With AWS, they had a 7-year lead. And he said that just doesn't happen. And I think your point is exactly right. Who thought about outsourcing computing power? Because that's really all AWS is.
That's it. And one of the largest deals I ever did when I was in sales was to U.S. Internetworking. And this was 2001. No, 2000.
Yeah.
Right. And that was basically a cloud provider, what they call back then an application service provider.
Service ASP, I know. Right? Yeah, absolutely. We don't use that word much anymore.
Right. Yeah, because we just assume that. Right. And this is like I think it was even before Salesforce was founded.
Yes.
And they basically just had, most of their business was Microsoft Exchange,
Yep.
which is their email servers.
Right.
And it was such a foreign concept back then.
Well, and early 2000s, I was talking about ASPs and how agencies and brokers could use that and outsource all of their IT infrastructure. Everybody thought I was crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to, you mean my data is going to be someplace else? I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, when did you become interested in Amazon?
Well, as I was doing the research for this book, actually the original idea for the book was called The Risk Dilemma, because that's really what I think businesses face. And I came across Amazon, obviously, and then the shareholder letters, and it literally started as a white paper. And I showed it to some publishing friends here. I live just outside Nashville, and several of them came back almost immediately and said, this is not a white paper, this is a book.
Yeah.
Nobody's really done, and I did, again, looked at it, but nobody's really done a deep dive like this into the letters themselves. And so research, lots of story behind kind of how it came into the book. But book was officially published in September. And has really taken off. I mean, I think people are really resonating with two things. One is I was able to extract 14 principles that I believe are throughout how Amazon grew that I think can apply to any business. And people are just fascinated with Bezos and Amazon. And, we all use them. We may like them or not. But I think my point of view is, aren't you curious how we did it? Yeah. 25 years. The fastest company ever to reach $100 billion in sales. And I just became curious, how did they do it? And what's even more astounding to me is he actually laid out his plan in the shareholder letters. Yeah. So I call them hidden in plain sight.
And that's it, because people think it's some secret.
No, he thinks differently. That is for sure. But and again, why did he do that? I mean, a lot of people would go, no, that's our secret sauce. But I think he has a different understanding. And frankly, I think at his heart, he's a teacher. He likes helping others. And so, so that's where the book came from.
And let's talk about those principles. Is there any hierarchy to them? Are they autonomous?
So the 14 principles stand on their own and work with each other. Yeah. And I've broken them down into what I call 4 cycles. So test, build, accelerate, and scale. And I believe any business, whether they're a startup or been around for 50 years, are always going through these different cycles, because even a well-established business has to test out new ideas, new products, new platforms, new services to find out, is this going to work? Does it resonate with customers or not? And then they accelerate the growth once they've got a firm foundation, and then they scale. And again, different principles apply depending on where the business is in those areas.
And let's walk through. Can you give us an example of maybe one part of their business that went through that process?
Well, Amazon, let's just take test. I think what's unique at Amazon is they are always experimenting. Yeah. They are never resting on AWS. Oh, now we've got it. Now we don't have to worry about it anymore. And they're even within AWS, they're always inventing and innovating. And actually, one of my principles is called practice dynamic invention and innovation. And so that's really a core concept at Amazon. The other one that I highlight, and it is principle number 1, which is encourage successful failure. And that is typically not a mindset in a business. Right. And the bigger the business, the less that is practiced. Because everybody knows you need to innovate today. I think that's a common, we need to do that. The unfortunate part is, we want you to innovate, but you better be right.
Yeah, exactly. Do it right and not fail.
Right? And I'm convinced people aren't afraid of failure. They're actually afraid of the consequences of failure. Yeah. Right? And so encourage successful failure is something that's core at Amazon. In fact, Bezos says in the letters, a couple places, that he believes Amazon is the best place to fail because they have a process in place to learn from those failures and move forward. And he says in the last letter that he's written, 2018, that as Amazon grows, the size of our failures need to grow.
Yeah.
Because if we aren't pushing the envelope, these are my words, if we aren't pushing the envelope, the impact on the business isn't big enough. And what you hope, and again, he says we don't do it willy-nilly, right? But we're intentional. But by its very nature, when you experiment, you're going to fail. Because if you're not, it's not an experiment.
Yeah. And is there any one failure that you've noticed that you think they're going to either retry, like the phone, or?
Well, I talk about the phone in the book. So most people don't even realize that Amazon actually built and released a Fire phone, right? We hear about the Fire TV and the Fire tablet, but they had a phone. Bezos' pet project, released in 2014, utter failure. And in fact, at one point, they lowered the price to 99 cents and they couldn't give them away. Because, I mean, think about it. 2014, we already had our phones. Smartphones were well established. What could they bring that was different? Well, they had a couple technology things that were intriguing, but not enough to pry Android or iOS out of somebody's hand. That last quarter of 2014, they wrote off $178 million in inventory that they couldn't move.
Wow.
So the failure. Now, where's the success? The group that created their device division, it's actually called Lab 126, which created the Fire phone, went on to also then create the Echo.
Yeah.
So Amazon Echo and Alexa work together. Echo's the hardware, Alexa's the machine learning that provides the answers. So that is looking like it's going to be one of their successes.
Yeah.
And so again, it's that idea of, we fail, but what do we learn from it, and what can we take into something else?
And also, I mean, do you think this could only exist with a founder versus a hired CEO?
That's an interesting question. No, I don't. I think it takes a unique leader, right, to be able, one, to have the long-term thinking necessary for that type of mindset. And actually that's another principle that Bezos, and that's in the build cycle, that Bezos really embodies. He thinks long-term. Yeah. And I think that's probably the biggest problem with looking at failure as a positive, not a negative.
Right, because you see the difference between like him and a Tim Cook.
Yes.
Right. Who is a great operations guy, very, that's his, and, he came from IBM, and, I had a company that got bought by IBM, so I know the structure there.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And when you have like an operations guy, they worry about the next earnings.
Right.
The analysts.
Yep.
The board of directors. And they can be fired.
Yes, if they don't hit those quarterly. And that's one thing that Bezos really did well from the very beginning. In fact, in that original 1997 letter, he basically lays out, here's how I am going to run this company. And it is based on long-term, not quarterly, short-term. And he actually says in one paragraph, if that doesn't fit your investment philosophy, then you shouldn't invest in Amazon. And it took probably 10, 12 years. I mean, you look at their stock price, those early first, half of their life, it was nothing. In fact, it up and down and tanked a couple times, except when all of a sudden, right?
Right.
Well, the all of a sudden started 10 or 15 years ago.
What do you think the tipping point was for them, where people went from, it's just a .com to, boy, they figured it out?
Well, again, if you look at the stock price, it's in the probably after the financial crisis, and their investments really started paying off. Yeah. Their fulfillment center, their infrastructure there, and that's when you look at the Amazon Marketplace, their third-party sellers, that started growing. Certainly AWS is a large part of that. That has become a cash cow
Right.
for them, right? So I think all of those bets they made early on and nurtured and grew, and that's again the build and accelerate. That's where those cycles come in, and they just all kind of started taking off, and the stock price, reflected that piece of it.
From my vantage point, I think it was probably when they started offering Prime, because when you got free shipping, all of a sudden it was easier to buy it off of Amazon than it was to just drive down the street and get it.
Absolutely.
If you could wait 12 hours, it'd be on your doorstep.
Yeah. And for Bezos, Prime was a big bet. And virtually all of the senior leadership team at that time didn't want to do it, pushed against it, thought it was a crazy idea. And Bezos said, in my gut, I believe if it's better for the customers, it will be ultimately better for Amazon and their shareholders. Yeah. And those first years, Prime wasn't that big. No. It actually really started taking off when they added video streaming. And they added other stuff to Prime. So now there are over 35 different services you get as part of your Prime membership. And frankly, you can't afford not to be part of Prime.
You're crazy not to. You get music, you get storage for your photos.
Yep.
You get the
the video. You get it's all. You get some free Kindle books. You get and what's really interesting is Prime members on average spend twice as much money on Amazon than non-Prime members. And so again, it's that long-term thinking and building that customer trust to bring people back.
Because his thinking is kind of orthogonal in that, most consultants would tell you focus on core competence and ignore everything else. Right. And I've been on the board of a company that wanted to go from being a service company to a product company. And I go, you've never built a product. You don't know how to sell a product. You don't know how to support a product.
Right. Yeah.
Right. The idea to go from an online retail to a software infrastructure company, it would appear
astounding.
Crazy.
Appear crazy.
Yeah.
But part of what happened is AWS was built for their internal use.
It was, and people don't know that. Because
people don't realize that. And part of what was happening is Bezos was getting really frustrated because the IT departments in the different divisions were slowing down innovation.
Yeah.
And really slowing down invention, right? And then being able to do more. And so they came up with this idea of, if we have all these common things, everybody needs a database, everybody needs computing power, everybody needs, why do we have all these different departments handling that themselves? We'll kind of spin that over here, and then you'll get access to. Well, they proved that out internally, and frankly, they never thought about offering it until somebody said they were doing a retreat, and looking at, okay, what do we do well? Well, we really do computing really well.
Yeah.
And you know what? There could be developers who would want access to that. And so again, testing, starting small, they did it internally, but then accelerating and continuing that pace of invention and innovation to now it's, huge.
Well, that's
part of their business.
I remember in the late 90s, the people who built AWS I used to work with, and they were like the top people. And I'm like, you're going to Amazon?
Right.
And they go, no,
really? They sell books.
Right. It's like, what, are you going to build a web page? And that's what I was thinking it was.
Right.
You're going to build web pages.
Well, and even fast forward to today, there is so much on AWS that's self-service. So you don't need, for some of it, you need some technical expertise, but you can do it yourself. And even now, because of Echo and Alexa, bringing that down even to a consumer level. So I use AWS on my own website to automatically add audio to every article that I publish. Yeah. And it literally is pennies that I'm paying, but they've automated. I set it up. It's self-service. It's a WordPress plugin. when you look at that, no wonder people go to it,
Yeah.
right? And more people.
And do you think he's going to proactively divide up the company to avoid any antitrust?
Yeah, the antitrust question is really interesting, and I am not an expert in antitrust, but I certainly am reading and kind of following that. I think here's my opinion, somewhat informed. The traditional antitrust has historically been about customer harm.
Yeah.
Right. So it's more expensive for the customer. They don't have as many options to access. And that certainly was Microsoft. The whole Windows commanded such a large market share. What's interesting to me with Amazon, and again, I'm going to put Google, Facebook, and some of the other ones, they may have a bit more of an issue there. But with Amazon, their market share of e-commerce has actually dropped 10 percentage points. So right now it's about 38% of online retail is Amazon. It used to be 50.
Yeah.
So that's sort of arguing against a monopoly kind of idea. So I don't know. Obviously, there are a lot of conversations around that, and are these tech companies too big? All of that. Philosophically, I have a problem with punishing a successful company who's done things well. But
the punishment isn't financial, because he would be worth probably more if they broke it up.
Could be. That is true. That's
right,
true.
Yeah. I mean, AWS would be probably in the top 5 most valuable technology companies. Mm-hmm. The problem is that the profit from AWS is funding everything else. So, and if you
so
take
to
that
answer
away,
your question, I was going to say, to answer your question, I right now I would say I can't see a scenario where he would voluntarily do that because of what you just said. All of those pieces work together.
Right.
Meaning Prime helps AWS helps support Prime and retail, and let's not forget Marketplace. Marketplace allows third-party sellers on Amazon's site. And again, there's discussion around, do they have too much power for third-party sellers? But in the 2018 letter, Bezos released for the first time that 58% of product sales are actually third-party sellers, not Amazon. So even on their own platform, they don't have a majority of sales.
And what do you think about kind of the ethics of it, being that he has access to credit, he never got addicted to the earnings, mm-hmm. right? That would really, like Facebook, clearly they're addicted to Wall Street and the earnings and trying to keep the stock price up.
Right.
And he never really cared about that.
Everything that I read about him and stock prices, he doesn't care. In fact, he's said a number of different times that he tells his employees, if a stock price goes up 30%, that doesn't mean you're 30% smarter.
Right.
If a stock price falls 30%, that doesn't mean you're 30% stupider. Stock price is a voting mechanism, and we want to be voted on over the long term. And again, you look at their stock history, and that certainly has been the case.
And where do you see them going? Are you a futurist? Do you have any predictions?
I have some predictions. I hesitate to call myself a futurist. Because of their innate mindset of invention and innovation, I think we will see certainly more from Amazon around a deeper partnership with Blue Origin, so Bezos' space company. And I guess specifically I'm talking about their Project Kuiper, which is putting up 3,600 small breadbox-sized satellites to provide internet access virtually anywhere. So not even where we have it here in the U.S., virtually everywhere. but it's not, right? And so what does that open up? And AWS already has a satellite ground station service that you can plug into. So I think you'll see that Blue Origin and Amazon and AWS, I think some of that will get a little more tight. And certainly he feels, in fact, he's been quoted saying that he suspects Kuiper might be their fourth big bet. So he identifies their three: Marketplace, Prime, and AWS as their three big bets, and they're actively looking for a fourth, and he's thinking that might be. So if he's thinking it's a big bet like AWS, what does that even mean, in the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah. But I mean, even like going into competition with UPS or FedEx.
Yeah. And again, that last, transportation. So here in Nashville, actually, when the HQ2 stuff was announced, kind of Nashville had this little side announcement that we're getting 5,000 jobs for Amazon's transportation center of excellence. So everything that happens from when you click buy till it shows up on your porch is transportation. And they're doing lots of stuff there. So will they offer that, all of that, as a service to others? Well, they sort of already are. They've got shipping, overseas, container shipping that they're getting into. Certainly, they're building up their air fleet. They just broke ground earlier this year on a transportation hub in Cincinnati International Airport. So again, but here, back to your earlier point, what company do you know of has all of those things going on and doing it well?
All of
right?
them. Right.
All of them. So that's what I tried to help explain in the book. And by the way, the book is the Bezos Letters, 14 Principles to Grow Your Business Like Amazon. But really looking at how did he do it? So the last cycle is scale. And so my question really was, there are over 650,000 employees at Amazon worldwide now. How do you keep that culture growing that big? And I'm still not sure I really understand that. But he certainly has a lot to say in his letters about culture in a business and what needs to happen to keep it going.
And as far as like his ethics and character also seem to be exceptional.
So I have to say, yes, totally agree with that. No, I think you're absolutely correct. I will say his what's the right word I want to use? Earlier in 2019, let's just say he stumbled a bit on that. And I was at the end of writing the manuscript, and I remember going, oh, now what am I going to do? So the divorce. But even honestly, look at that. Look at the divorce. McKinsey had legal right to 50% of everything. She didn't take it.
Well,
their settlement, but she got she got $38 billion. But
you can't live on that.
No. I mean, hear me. But she, at the time, he was like 137 billion. So again, could have had half, and he still has voting rights on her stock.
Right.
I mean, so all of those little. So anyway,
I have a guess on that, though.
Okay.
I bet in his will she gets the other part of the half.
That might be. Yeah, that might be. Yeah, it might be.
Or there's some kind of, because it went too fast, too smooth, and too disproportionate.
There's something else. It absolutely did go very fast and very smooth.
Right. It wasn't ugly. It wasn't. It was very little, bad press. Some photos and stuff.
But really
human.
Yeah, exactly. So I do think you're right. I think in terms of, and again, I have to go back to say, whether you love Bezos or hate him, whether you think he's putting, retail out of business, which I don't happen to believe. I know a lot of people do. Aren't you curious how he did it? And are there lessons you can learn and take away from what he has built that can apply to your own business?
So if somebody got the book and read it, what would they get out of it? Or what do you hope they get out of it?
I hope they would understand that what Bezos has created are things that can apply to their business. So a few of them that we highlighted, right? So even something as simple as start thinking about how do I encourage successful failure so that my employees, who by the way probably have some really good ideas,
Yeah.
can actually feel comfortable. So creating what I call a safe to risk environment in order to what? And for Bezos, it's always focused on what's better for the customer. In fact, one of the principles, right? And this is his word, obsess over customers. And again, that's his mindset and has been. Can that go too far? Maybe, but I have yet to find another business that has gone too far in obsessing over customers.
Yeah, cool. Do I need to ask where they can get the book?
Well, certainly at your favorite online retailer, Barnes & Noble, and certainly Amazon. It's there. And it's also available in your local bookstore. So if they don't have it in stock, they can order it for you and get it in quickly. Any listener that does get the book, we have some bonuses that go along with it, and those are available at thebezosletters.com. And also includes that website actually an assessment we've created to actually help you get an idea what principles should I start working on first? What would have most impact for your business?
And where can people go to follow you?
So thebezosletters.com, my main website is steveanderson.com, and my primary platform is LinkedIn. So would love to connect with people on LinkedIn. I'm very active there.